Hi, welcome to Got Questions? I'm Parker, friend and right-hand man to Dr. William DiPaolo. Will is an immunologist and currently studying up at the University of Washington in Seattle. And he's studying the gut microbiome, which he's been doing for the past 10 years. In addition to his own lab, running his own lab and doing his own research projects, Will serves as director of CMIST, Center for Microbiome Sciences and Therapeutics. In the second half of this episode, the NAFLD episode, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, Will and I get into some discussion about how research is presented to the public by the news and social media. We also talk about the current state of nutrition and diet research, which leads us to discussion about diet and mental health, specifically the gut microbiome and mental health, and what is now referred to as the gut-brain axis, that back and forth communication between gut microbes and the brain. So Will gives a great analogy in this episode about how bacteria adapt to a changing environment, to changing conditions within the gut. This is the cold weather and jacket analogy that I mentioned a couple episodes back. I barely keep a straight face. It made me laugh. Hopefully it'll make you chuckle. And with that, I give you my friend and boss, Dr. Will DiPaolo.
It reduced what they're calling intestinal permeability. And this is another big problem that I have with the field right now and what the nomenclature is. And so I don't make comments in the box if you don't agree with me on this, but this is my opinion really, and I don't think it's gonna change based on what anybody says. That there's no test for intestinal permeability. So the fact that leaky gut, it's just, unless you have inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, then of course you're going to have probably a leaky gut. But people generally just don't have a leaky gut. And or if they do, there's no test right now that can specifically tell you you have a leaky gut. There's sort of tests that test for other things that you can kind of say, well, because this is high, maybe they this is high in the blood now, so they have a leaky gut. Well, that's bullshit. In a way, I think it's because it's not specific to intestinal permeability. And what do they mean by intestinal permeability? Is it permeable to everything? Is it permeable to only certain size molecules? Is it permeable to bacteria? There's no standard of nomenclature. There's no standard literature. There's no standard of anything when it comes to intestinal permeability. So I always have a hard time swallowing anything if that's the conclusion of that paper. And I'm sure it's good work.
Well, that's the headline that is pulled out for the lay.
Oh, but even the paper, I have the paper in front of me.
Oh, do you?
The title of the paper says, improves abnormal small intestinal permeability. So even though they were looking at it to treat non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, it didn't do F-all for that, but it did have a role in intestinal permeability, or at least decreasing the amount of lactulose and mannitol in your urine. And that's what they tested for and what they're calling a leaky gut. So basically, small intestinal permeability, I guess that's what they're defining it through their study, is an increase in these sort of markers that you drink, I think. And then if you have a leaky gut, they'll come out into your bloodstream. But I can't get into the real nitty gritty on that, but that is very specific for this study. Other people measure top protectin in the stool, other studies measure. So even the measurements for intestinal permeability are not
all over
study to study. So I think it's hard to compare, and it's hard to come up with sort of a standardized diagnosis of intestinal permeability or leaky gut, basically. So I think
which is nuts that the headline then for the lay person, for someone like me, says that FMTs show promise as a treatment for NAFLD.
Right, because it didn't.
Not at all. But because I was like, wait, this is new. Let me click this link, and then I'm like, wait a minute, and then I saw a couple other articles just like that.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing with I always talk about educating the public about sort of the microbiome and what's known and all that, because there's so much misinformation out there, and the press and these news places are just looking for a headline in order to get people to click on the link. And everybody wants to be able to, I think a fecal transplant, it would be great, and it would be an easy fix for a lot of these diseases, but how many times in life is there an easy fix for something. It's never that simple. And I think that
That's
everyone's
actually one of my questions, though, because I was curious in the beginning of the abstract, or somewhere I think in the abstract, I read this to you earlier. Despite the obvious connections between macronutrients in the diet, the microbiome, and NAFLD, there is a paucity of studies looking at this relationship. So that's what you guys wrote. But
Yeah.
that made me just wonder, well, what are researchers looking at? And what I don't understand why someone wouldn't automatically at least start looking at diets. And is it because it is so complex that
Mhm.
I mean, it kind of goes back to your comment last week about low hanging fruit. Like, is it just easier to see if FMT is going to fix something or not? I don't know.
Yeah, I think, and I think diet's a very hard thing to study. And, there is a sort of, in science, which I don't agree with this either. So we're hitting all sort of my soapboxes.
Yeah,
And
get on it. This is
so
your
I'm just
platform.
going to get on a taller one now. But a lot of people consider nutritional science sort of a pseudoscience. Like, they don't take it seriously. They don't take these sort of studies seriously. And that was one thing that I wanted to make sure that in our study, it's basically a nutritional intervention, but we didn't dig that mechanistically into it because we only had 2 years to study it, because then Tanya was gone. She had to leave the lab, but to go back to her medical profession. But we tried to come at it from really trying to understand, is it modulation of the gut microbiome that's causing this, at least as far as mechanism goes? And it's not. But we did isolate. We did find that there are differences in the lauric acid and the palmitic and the stearic acid. And so I think that's the next place to start now, is going molecularly after these things. And I just think that when people hear scientists, I'm not talking about just general people, when they hear nutritional intervention, they roll their eyes and they say pseudoscience. And that's something that I'm hoping.
Which is just bizarre, because that's what we're fueled on. So there's no way that your nutritional habits don't have an effect. It's just, that's nuts.
And it makes it more difficult. And granted, so I have seen on grant study sections and things like that, more and more good science coming out that's looking at the molecular nutritional science of things. And so I think that that's really important. And I'm really happy that this next generation of scientists is saying, the people who have been in science for longer, who cares? We're gonna do this. And I always like those sort of grants, because I think it shows a progressive way of thinking. And the other difficult thing, though, is that everybody's microbiome is so unique to themselves.
Right.
And then you're taking a diet and you're asking them to, a group of people who have different microbiomes, all to react the same way to a standard diet, where it might be so complicated and so personalized that it has to be every diet has to be tailored for each individual in the study. And
and this goes back
to
the nutrition, not even, because I started to say last week a little bit with the form of with PTSD, changing my diet and doing the elimination diet to take care of all the GI issues I had for about a year and a half. Diet did nothing to change anything. So and nothing.
You're somebody who already ate a very healthy diet anyway. Your diet's not filled with so of course that was kind of it was a effort. It was a trial of.
Yeah, I kind of looked at the nutritionist at my ND, and I was like, okay, I'll do this, but I was like, I eat so correctly and nutritiously. I don't think this is the problem.
No, I mean, knowing your diet, knowing what I know about you, that I would have said that it was a waste of time, because
I should have come and talked to you. Although you might have had, I don't know, maybe you'd have been like, yeah, you've got PTSD, Kato. I don't know. But the minute I started doing all the work with the therapist, that's when things started to change. It had nothing to do.
Right. So, and that's the case, but you're probably at such a low risk for developing fatty liver disease in that context. So now, you layer that sort of mind gut connection on top of fatty liver disease, on top of PTSD in different individuals. And I just think that this is the microbiome. The microbiome is, go on.
Well, I was just thinking that the population that you guys studied is a population of people that doesn't have access to better foods, more nutritional foods and whatnot. And I suspect that maybe the home life isn't always the best, or like, and I, you know, theoretically came from a great home life, but you know, the adoption piece and the divorce had something to do with something. So then you have someone who does have fatty liver disease or NAFLD, but then no one's even thinking about, but maybe they have some other things that are, you know, affecting them in their mental state.
Right. And so this is why, you know, I know that in in irritable bowel syndrome, which is like very much linked to depression in individuals, I think there's been a lot more work looking at sort of linking depression, microbiome, and IBS. And I think we're going to have to take that into account with some of these diseases as like far as like mental state and sort of depression or low levels of sort of vitamins and hormones that are neurotransmitters that could also be playing into this. You know, and I think that that's where the microbiome, the field, it's very complicated. And this is why I laugh when I see these like things that are going to tell you how to eat properly, and they're going to give you their probiotic, and then they're going to give you recipes for life, and you're going to be awesome, and you're going to live until you're 150 years old. And I want to roll my eyes because like, well, where's the mental health evaluation that they're giving? Like maybe these people have depression. And so then what ends up happening is you could be like really well, no matter what, their health is going to change if they start eating like these diets that you send them, these foods that you send them. Yes, your health is going to change. You're going to lose weight probably because now you don't have to think about what the calorie counts are or whatever. So yeah, you're going to see some improvements, but is it really improving what's going on in your organs or what's going on in your gut like, because of your depression or your PTSD and things like that? And I think that, there's probably some great success stories that of people who've lost 40 pounds after going on these nutritional supplements through the company that measured their blood metabolites or whatever. But in the end, is it really changing the microbiome, or is it just changing it? You know, that it has to be a lifestyle change that lasts a lifetime. So you have to be eating this way and taking these things for a long time. We don't know how long. So something about the microbiome is that it can change, and diet is a good thing at changing it, but it's so resilient that it does change back. Like there's studies where people go to Africa and live with tribes eating like bugs and like things off the like roots and like plants and things like that. And their microbiome completely changes by doing that. But as soon as they come back to the United States and they eat their first meal here, it changes back. And nobody's done a test, nobody's done a longitudinal study that looked at how long do you have to be on a certain diet to permanently alter the microbiome so that if something happens, you don't change right back. That we don't know that question. So when people want to say they want to change their diet, you have to make sure that that's something you can do for the rest of your life. These fad diets and these drinking lemonade and you're drinking water with lemon and iced tea or honey and whatever it is.
It's
master cleanse.
Cayenne pepper, honey, lemon.
It changes your microbiome dramatically, like within hours. And actually, the interesting thing where there was like a small little study that American Gut put out on this, which was kind of interesting. But like it looked like the microbiome was changing in these people before they even started the diet, which makes me think of like either stress or like something was already influencing it. But then like after they started it, everything changed. They saw this huge separation and they got tons of proteobacteria and they had, which are not good bugs, and they had decreases in some types. And then Akkermansia was high, which is a mucin degrader, which eats the mucus in your intestine. And then like they stopped it, but those changes sustained for like 14 days after they stopped this cleanse. And they only did a 3-day cleanse or I think a 3-day cleanse. 14 days or 12 days afterwards, it still changed. And then it all came back down to normal, but it still didn't look like it did beforehand, but it was pretty close. So these sort of, even these fad diets, you go right back to the metabolic program that you were prior to the thing. So prior to the fad diet or whatever you did. So are you really changing anything? I'm sure you shed a lot of weight. I'm sure you caused a lot of stress on your body. I'm sure you did a lot of things that you cause all these blooms and bacteria that may not have an effect until
that's interesting. That to really change anything is interesting because I recently
I was like, I don't know how that's happened, because I just shed like a bunch of fat. There was no need to. I wasn't trying to. I've stayed with the same nutritional plan. I do track my macros, and I feel like I'm eating all the time, to be honest. But all of a sudden, I was hovering 110 to 113, and I now hover 104 to 106, and it just all sort of. But the work that I continue to do with the therapist, I actually think that's like where the change is coming from, because I haven't changed my diet, and quite frankly, for 12 weeks, so before I got Tobias, my puppy, who is almost 6 months old, I actually was doing nothing but yoga and carrying him up and down the stairs to go out and pee every 2 hours or whatever it was. But I mean, I wasn't really working out.
Yeah.
So I started to wonder, like, well, is the change actually coming because I do eat nutritiously, but I'm now fixing the brain.
And I think that that's probably exactly what's happening. I think that you like,
because some neurotransmit your body probably holds
like,
on to stuff.
Right, and there's like satiety, like your gut brain. I mean, it controls how full you feel, how quickly it controls your motility, so how fast things pass through your body, and that like leads to differences in absorption. And then all of these things are linked to the gut brain axis. So I think that it's not surprising that if somebody who eats healthy but has trauma could actually like lose weight once they start fixing the trauma. The other thing is, like, if you're sleeping better, like, so sleep has a huge impact on your microbiome and the circadian rhythm. So like the microbiome you wake up with in the morning is different than the microbiome you wake up with or that you go to bed.
I think that's so crazy.
Right. So like during the day, like its exposures change. And so that means the more restful sleep, the better sleep you get, the better microbiome that you could have, or like it's rest for you, it's rest for your microbiome. So I think that also plays a role. And so like if you're dealing with your stress better, then your sleep better, then that could be having roles as well.
Your microbiome's gonna get the benefit.
Right. And I think that this is something that, I think about, some people think about, but other people don't. And like, yeah, you can change it through these sort of temporary fixes, but then as soon as you go back to your normal dietary habits or your normal sleeping patterns or whatever, then you're going back, then you're going to reverse the effect that you're having. And so I just think that, again, like, we can have a podcast down the road about these sort of like companies that offer these sort of metabolic
the poop kit.
Well, that too, but like these metabolic fingerprinting. They'll give you your metabolites and they'll give you your microbiome thing, and then they'll give you their supplements that they want you to take, and they'll give you a nutritional like diet guide and all this sort of stuff, and you're basically, they're asking you to change your life for like $300-$500 a month or whatever. But people just need to understand that the minute that stops, then they're gonna reverse everything back. So like these changes, like, I think the more I study this is that if you want to change your microbiome, you have to change your life, and it needs to be changed completely. And you just need to go back to sort of the things that our mother and grandmothers always taught us, which was like, eat your vegetables, get a good night's sleep, like, try not to have these
few minutes of like quiet time.
Like get out there and play with your friends, like exercise, like whatever. I think those are things that we just need to reincorporate. And like, I don't know nowadays how to convince people to go back to that, because I think we're so tied to our cell phones, and we're so everybody in the United States is always, I'm so busy, I have so much to do, and this sort of thing. And I always say, well, we're all busy, like, you're no more busy.
And it's a badge of pride. I feel like a lot of people will start off by saying something like, oh my God, I got no sleep last night. Oh my God.
Right.
I'm always like, really? I got 8 hours. I'm like, why are we so proud of something like that?
And it's this sort of, and I don't know, I don't even know how millennials deal with this. Like, I'm definitely not a millennial. So I think they might have a very different way of like, but I know our generation is definitely much more about like that sort of like all the like, I walked both ways uphill to get to school, and then a lot of us were latchkey kids. I think that's interesting to think about too, is that we took care of ourselves because of most of our parents.
Do you see any articles during the lockdown about how our generation was one of the best, like we were able to handle the lockdown better than the other
Yeah,
generation.
yeah. No, I did. I read the articles
Yeah.
about that. Because what are we? What are
Like,
we? Generation Xers, right? We're like,
yeah. I'm
so
like, yeah, I know what to do in this situation. How many times did the power go out in Washington, D.C. and we had nothing? You were just, you know, or like,
yeah.
you just had
No, I
nothing
think
to do that, making mixtapes and stuff like that.
right. But I think that, you know, all these things, you know, our lifestyle, like how we lived our life up to this point, have big impacts on our microbiomes also. So it's like not just, you know, we're saying it in a joking way, but like your microbiome's with you from birth, right? And so like how you treat your body, what you do to your body, where you live, it all affects your microbiome, and you're tweaking yourself, and those bugs are tweaking their genes so that they can survive better in the atmosphere that you're providing them. So it's almost like you have tenants living inside you, and like you keep changing the temperature, and so they'll like, okay, well now I'm going to go get more jackets so that I can, like, it's really cold in here. So eventually they start turning on different genetic programs to live in your gut environment, but that genetic program may be linked to something that causes inflammation by you know, this bug is saying, well, now I have all these jackets on, and then you have something that, you know, you have little police in your gut that hate blue jackets, and so then they start attacking these people that have the blue jackets. Like, and the police are the immune system, and the blue jackets are like the surface of the bacteria. This is the analogy. It's really
no, I love it. I was like, oh, I can't wait to see where this.
Yeah, it was not a very well thought out analogy. That's like right off to the cuff. But, you know, so then all of a sudden now you have surveillance going on for like bugs with blue jackets, and that's because you changed their temperature, you changed their living environment.
And then what happens when you change it back dramatically?
Right. And then so then maybe they can't change, you know.
Oh God, maybe they can't shed all their jackets.
Right, exactly. Or they shed it, but they only can shed partially, or but now, you know, but their blue jacket may influence their neighbor, the other bacteria across the street, who are like, oh my God, they have their blue jacket on, and like now I have to have my pink
red
jacket on because I hate blue. And so then you have, it doesn't just affect that family of bacteria, it's starting to affect each family in the neighborhood in different ways, because what one bacteria changes as far as what it produces, metabolites, or, you know, what it changes on its surface, is going to affect its neighbor, because that neighbor has to live in close proximity to it. So it's like, if the, you know, here's a better analogy maybe. Okay. So like you start changing your diet to eat, because you're studying for finals and you just decide that all you have time for is pizza, like frozen pizzas, and you're just eating frozen pizzas all the time. So then your gut bacteria, there's one guy in the neighborhood who's like, I love this processed cheese. So they start, but they get really bad gas, or they get like when they eat that, and so they're letting methane or whatever out into their yard, and their neighbors are like, God damn, it stinks, and so they start wearing masks. But because of the methane, they're like, they start trying to, now they have to live in this environment with all this stink around them, so they have to change in order to live in that environment. And so it's like a progression, you know, and so then they start producing something different that their neighbors hate. And it's sort of this trickle down thing. I don't know if this is a good analogy or not. Tell me in the comments or whatever. But but you know, so that change happens. And then to reverse it, that means you have to reverse it starting from the trickle down all the way to the bottom. It has to be all the way reversed back up. So are you like picturing like a bacteria eating like frozen pizza? Because that's kind of what I'm.
Yeah, and then I actually went to the pizza bagel thing, which was one of my favorite ads, as you know. Right. Because I used to sing that jingle in college all the time.
Right. So, but that's like, and that's just a way to explain that, you know, what you feed your body is going to feed certain bacteria better than others. Because maybe the neighbor bacteria is like, it stinks here, I can't live in this, and they commit suicide and they die, because they can't live next door to this. And so that wipes out a whole population of neighbors, and lets the stinker, he's like, oh, that house is empty, my kids can go live there.
Move in.
And so then his kids move in there and they take over that niche. And so then they start producing more methane gas. And soon you have a toxic dump, like in multiple ways in one. But like you have basically a toxic neighborhood that's all producing this sort of, you know, it's perpetrated, or it's like inhabited by this one family of bacteria that's like taken over everybody.
It's just hanging out, eating pizza, producing methane.
Yeah, producing. I'm not saying that frozen pizza does produce methane.
No, right. No.
It was an example. But yeah, but just basically that, you know, some bacteria will thrive in that environment and others will die. And so that is my bad analogy of that. But now you have like a whole community of bugs that are all derived from this one family that are all producing some stink,
Something
that,
that's, yeah.
something that's deleterious to your own health. So I think that was where my analogy was going with that one. But I kind of like
That's
it.
much better.
I'll think about that. But, yeah,
But
so
speaking of did you have like some way that you wanted to wrap that?
wrap it up? Yeah, no, I was just saying, so I can wrap it up in like 2 sentences to like sum up the paper and everything. So basically, this paper that was published last year from our lab, or was it? Yeah, it was 2020, from a lab looking at fatty liver disease. Basically, the take-home message is that you can treat fatty liver disease by changing your diet, but which can change your microbiome, but your microbiome alone cannot reverse the fatty liver disease. You need to have that dietary sort of education of the microbiome.
Mhm.
So whether it's because, and that means that that environment that you're putting your bugs in is important. And so feeding it the right foods that make these bugs thrive, that then can have a positive or negative impact on disease. And so I think the take-home message is you are what you eat, and you don't want to make a toxic dump in your environment, in your intestines. So you want to make sure that you promote, those healthy, vegan, loving bacteria rather than the stinkers that can like crowd them out. But
Right.
basically, you are what you eat, and that this is like we're making kind of light of it at the end, but this is an epidemic, and like where we really need to focus is less about trying to treat it through a fecal transplant, which is like putting a grenade into like hoping that works. And like we just need to start eating better and figuring out how to provide.
And then that does get into a whole other discussion.
Socioeconomic levels and things like that, but that's where this has to
Yeah.
come from. It has to come from that. We have to start treating disease at that level where it's because it's a disease that can be reversed. It's a disease that can be fixed. It's just through proper nutrition and lifestyle modifications, and those shouldn't be out of reach for any human being. They are,
Yeah.
and so that's the world we
That's
live
where
in.
the food industry needs to do a
Right,
whole lot of work.
Yeah, right,
actually.
exactly. So, yeah, and on that note, I've got
Microbiome Club.
yes, now we have to run to that.
Yeah.
But
So,
thanks.
thanks
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
For my bad analogies. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, next week. Okay.
Bye.
All right, bye.
So can you tell that Will and I are good friends? That's really how most of our conversations go. We can talk about something or nothing at all, and we still manage to laugh. Anyway, I think what's most important to understand and what this project helps to illustrate, regardless of whether or not you suffer from NAFLD, is that one, the gut microbiome is resilient. And two, it's important to consider the environment of the intestines when doing research on the gut microbiome. Did you like that jacket analogy? I thought it was hilarious. It still makes me smile. And I have the pizza bagel song in my head now, which I'll probably just post to the website, yourgutquestions.com. If you are not familiar with it, it's a gem. Anyway, speaking of nutrition, the PUFA project is the next episode. PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids. This is a project also started at USC Keck Medical School. And this is with recent graduate student Denise Shack. And this project is really about infection. So Will and Denise looked at omega-6 fatty acids, and they wanted to see how the gut microbiome is affected by infection in the presence of omega-6 fatty acids. So yes, it's another great project. So check it out. And if you've got questions for Will, please let me know in the comments, or my puppy is snoring. I don't know if anyone can hear that. But please let me know in the comments section or on our website on the contact page, yourgutquestions.com, or please email me directly at aparker@medicine.washington.edu. See ya.